It is before sunrise on the first day of the week. A woman walks alone through the streets of Jerusalem. The city is still dark. The stones are cold under her feet. She carries spices, burial spices, because she could not finish the job 2 nights ago. They took him down from the cross too fast. The Sabbath was coming and the law would not wait, not even for grief. Her name is Mary. She comes from a town called Magdala, on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. A fishing town. A rough town. The kind of town people mention only when they want to explain why someone turned out wrong. She knows what it is to have people look through you. She knows what it is to be the kind of person the respectable circle quietly closes against. She had followed him from Galilee. She had sat at his feet while the religious men muttered. She had watched him die while the men who called themselves his closest friends ran into the dark. She did not run. And now she walks toward a sealed tomb with burial spices in her arms. Because that is what you do when everything you believed in is lying dead behind a Roman stone. Here is what she does not know yet. She does not know she is about to become the most important witness in the history of the world. She does not know that in approximately 20 minutes, she will look into the face of the risen Christ and hear him say her name. She does not know that in a few decades, a Roman Jewish historian named Josephus will write about a teacher from Galilee whose followers claimed he appeared to them alive after his death, a claim so disruptive that even Rome's official records could not quite make it disappear. She does not know any of that. She just walks in the dark because she loved him. Pay attention to this, because the story of every person who saw the risen Jesus begins the same way. Not with power, not with a strategy, not with proof laid out on a table for careful examination. It begins with someone in the dark, walking toward what they have already lost, carrying something they no longer know what to do with. And before we get to the 500, and we will get to the 500, because that number is the strangest and most overlooked detail in this entire story, we need to start here, with her, at dawn, at a tomb that should not be empty, because what happens next will take 40 days. It will involve at least 10 separate appearances. It will be witnessed by fishermen, doubters, grieving women, a murderer on a road, 2 men who did not recognize him until he broke bread, and 1 terrified group of people in a locked room who thought they were seeing a ghost. And every single one of them will spend the rest of their lives unable to stop talking about it. Let us start with the woman who came first. The Greek word for what happens in the resurrection accounts is ophtha. It means was seen or appeared to. But this is not a casual word. In the Jewish tradition, ophtha is the verb reserved for divine manifestation. When God appeared to Moses in the burning bush, the text uses a form of this word. When the angel appeared to Gideon, ophtha. When the risen Jesus appears to his disciples, Paul uses this same verb in what most scholars believe is the earliest written creed in Christian history, composed less than 5 years after the crucifixion itself. He was not just spotted, he was manifested. The word insists that what happened was not a grief hallucination or a shared delusion. It was an encounter. Mary is the first. She arrives at the tomb. The stone is rolled away. She runs back and finds Peter and John, and they run, all 3 of them running now, the whole city still asleep, and the 2 men look inside the empty tomb and then do something remarkable. They go home. The text says they went back to their own homes. Just like that. Empty tomb, folded burial cloths, and they go home. They do not understand, and so they leave. Mary stays. She stands outside the tomb and weeps. And then this is the moment she bends down and looks inside, and there are 2 angels sitting where the body had been, one at the head, one at the feet. And she is so locked in her grief that she does not even react to the angels the way you would expect. She does not fall on her face. She does not scream. She just tells them, voice breaking, that someone has taken his body, and she does not know where they put him. Then she turns around, and there is a man standing there. She thinks it is the gardener. He asks her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" And she says, and this is one of the most gutting lines in all of Scripture, she says, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." She has not thought through how she is going to carry a dead man's body out of a garden by herself. She has not planned that far ahead. She just wants him back. She just wants to finish what she came to do. And then he says, one word, her name, Mary, and she knows. In 2,000 years, theologians have written millions of words trying to explain the resurrection, But Mary's recognition comes down to this. She knew how he said her name, the timbre of it, the way it landed in the air between them. She had heard that voice say her name before, and she had never forgotten it. And now here it is again, on the other side of death, calling her back from the worst morning of her life. Rabboni, she says. Teacher. She reaches for him, and he says something deeply strange. He says, do not cling to me. Not because he does not want her near, but because something has changed the nature of what he is now. The mode of his existence is not what it was before. This is not a resuscitation. A resuscitated body picks up where it left off, limited, perishable, subject to time and hunger and decay. What she is standing in front of is something else entirely. The word the early church will use anastasis. Resurrection does not mean coming back. It means standing up. A new kind of standing. A permanent one. Mary Magdalene is sent back into Jerusalem with a message. Not Peter, not John, her. The woman from the rough town, the one polite society quietly closed against. She is the first apostle of the resurrection. The message she carries will travel for 2,000 years and reach every continent on earth. It starts with her name, spoken in a garden, at dawn. Now we need to talk about Peter. Because if Mary's story is about being found when you are lost, Peter's story is about being found when you are ashamed. His name was Simon before Jesus renamed him. Petros, rock. It was probably meant as a kind of affectionate joke at first, this big, impulsive, occasionally reckless fisherman from Bethsaida who spoke first and thought second, who once stepped out of a boat onto a storm-tossed sea and then immediately panicked and sank. Jesus called him Rock anyway. The name stuck. Peter was the one who walked on water, even briefly. Peter was the one who declared, first and loudest, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Peter was the one who drew a sword in Gethsemane and swung it at a temple guard, not because he had a plan, but because he was Peter. And Peter moved before he understood. And Peter was the one who stood in a courtyard in the cold while Jesus was being interrogated inside and denied 3 times in front of a servant girl and a couple of bystanders that he had ever met the man. 3 times. The rock crumbled 3 times. And on the 3rd denial, the rooster crowed, and Jesus was led past him through the courtyard, and their eyes met. Luke records that. Just that one detail, their eyes met, and then Peter went outside and wept bitterly. He had been so certain he would not break. When the resurrection happens, Peter's experience is tangled up in this. He runs to the tomb with John. He goes inside. He sees the burial cloths folded neatly where the body had been. He goes home. And somewhere between that morning and the evening of the same day, Jesus appears to him privately. We know this because Paul mentions it in his creed. He appeared to Cephas, Cephas being the Aramaic form of Peter's name, and then to the 12. One of the shortest, least described appearances in the entire list. We are not told what was said, but you can imagine. And then, 40 days later, after multiple appearances, after walking through walls into locked rooms, after breathing on the disciples and saying, "Receive the Holy Spirit," Jesus does something that seems specifically designed for Peter. He makes breakfast. He is standing on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, the same sea where Peter has been fishing his entire life, and he calls to the disciples in the boat who have been out all night and caught nothing. He tells them to throw the net on the right side. They do. The net fills so fast they cannot haul it in. And John, who was there, says quietly to Peter, "It is the Lord." And Peter, who is wearing almost nothing because he has been working all night, grabs his outer garment and jumps into the water. Even now, even after everything, he cannot wait for the boat. On the shore, there is charcoal burning, and fish cooking on it, and bread. Jesus feeds them first. He does not open with the hard conversation. He lets them eat. And then, 3 times, once for each denial, the fire, the same kind of fire, charcoal, and the detail is not accidental. He asks Peter, "Do you love me?" 3 times. "Do you love me?" 3 times, Peter says yes. 3 times, Jesus gives him a commission. Feed my sheep. Here's what most people miss. The verb Jesus uses the first 2 times is agapao, the word for unconditional, covenant love. The verb Peter uses in his answers is phileo, the word for brotherly affection, friendship, human warmth. Peter has been humbled enough that he will not reach for the larger word. He has learned what his certainty cost him. The 3rd time, Jesus drops to Peter's level. He uses phileo too. Do you love me even like a friend? And Peter is grieved, because he understands what is happening. He is being asked the question until he stops flinching from it. Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Yes, he knows. The man who denied him 3 times in the cold will preach his first sermon 50 days later to a crowd of 3,000 people and will not stop until the Romans take his head. Or more precisely, the tradition recorded by Eusebius, the church historian, is that Peter was crucified upside down because he told his executioners he was not worthy to die in the same position as his Lord. The rock did not crumble in the end, but he had to be broken first. He had to stand in the firelight and answer the question 3 times. And the extraordinary thing, the thing that stays with you when you sit with this story long enough, is that Jesus chose this man, knew this man would fail, named him Rock anyway, made him breakfast, asked him the question until there was nothing left to hide behind. If you have ever looked at your own history and thought, I have failed too many times, I have said the wrong things, I have run when I should have stayed, then Peter's story is yours, not as comfort in the sentimental sense, as evidence, as testimony from someone who was there, who failed more visibly than most of us ever will, and who was found on a beach by a fire-eating fish at dawn, being asked not, how could you, but simply, do you love me? The answer changed the world. We need to talk about Thomas, because history has been unfair to him. We call him Doubting Thomas. We say his name like it is a warning, a character flaw, a cautionary tale about the danger of asking questions. But if you read the account carefully, if you actually sit with what Thomas said and why he said it, you find something quite different from what the nickname suggests. Thomas was not a coward. When Jesus announced he was going back to Judea, back into the region where people had just tried to stone him, it was Thomas who said to the other disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." That is not the language of a man who runs from hard things. That is someone who, when he is all in completely. Thomas was not in the room the first time Jesus appeared to the disciples after the resurrection. We do not know where he was. We know he was grieving. We know that when the other 10 came to him and said, "We have seen the Lord," he said something that, in another era, might be called careful epistemology. "Unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe." He wanted physical evidence. He wanted the specific physical evidence, the wounds that would distinguish the risen Jesus from a vision, a ghost, a shared psychological event. He was not being stubborn. He was being precise. 8 days later, the disciples are together again. Thomas is there this time. The doors are locked, and Jesus walks through them. He stands in the center of the room. He says, and this is the first word he speaks, "Shalom," peace. And then he turns to Thomas, and he says, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." He knew exactly what Thomas had said. Every word. He had the answer ready. And here is the part that stops me every time I come back to this story. The text does not say Thomas touched him. It does not say Thomas reached out. It says Thomas answered. Just answered. Because when Jesus stood in front of him with the wound still in his hands, Thomas did not need to touch anything. He only needed one sentence, "My Lord and my God." It is the highest Christological confession in the entire Gospel of John. It comes from the man we call the doubter. And then Jesus says something that reaches across 20 centuries and lands directly on you. "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." He is talking about you. He is talking about everyone who will come after Thomas, who will not be in that room, who will not have the option of putting a hand into the wound. Blessed are they. You are in that sentence. Stay with me, because the road to Emmaus is happening at the same time as all of this, and it is the story that almost nobody tells properly, and it is, in some ways, the most haunting appearance of them all. The day of the resurrection. 2 disciples, not members of the 12, just ordinary followers, are walking from Jerusalem to a village called Emmaus, 7 miles. They are walking and talking, trying to make sense of the wreckage of the weekend. A man they believed was the Messiah is dead. The women are saying the tomb is empty, but nobody knows what to make of that. A stranger falls into step with them. He asks what they are talking about. and one of them, Cleopas, stops walking. The text says he stopped. He stood still, and he says to this stranger, with what you can only call exhausted grief, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" He thinks this man has been living under a rock. He has no idea he is talking to the subject of everything he is describing. "What things?" the stranger asks. And Cleopas tells him the whole story: the arrest, the crucifixion, the empty tomb, the women's report. And then he says something that breaks open the whole thing. He says, "We had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel." We had hoped. Past tense. Hope, already being spoken about in the past tense. On the afternoon of the day, the tomb was found empty. The stranger walks with them all the way to Emmaus. He opens the scriptures to them, Moses, the prophets, the Psalms, and explains how all of it was pointing toward exactly this. Their hearts, they will say later, burned while he spoke. They felt it but could not name it. They arrived at their destination and pressed him to stay for dinner. He sat at the table. He took bread. He blessed it. He broke it. And their eyes were opened, and he vanished. Now watch what happens next. They had just walked 7 miles. It is evening. They turn around and walk 7 miles back to Jerusalem, in the dark, to tell the others what happened. 7 miles back, in the dark. Because they cannot wait until morning. The burning in their chests would not let them wait. And here is the part nobody tells you. Jesus had brothers. Not metaphorical brothers, biological brothers, younger sons of Mary and Joseph, who grew up in the same house in Nazareth, who sat across the same table from him, who knew his voice when he was still learning to speak. The Gospels tell us plainly, his brothers did not believe in him during his ministry, not privately ambivalent, actively skeptical. John records that when people were telling Jesus to go to Jerusalem and show himself publicly, it was his brothers who pushed him sarcastically. "Leave here and go to Judea, so your disciples can see the works you are doing." No one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret. There is edge in that. There is the specific sarcasm of a younger sibling who has watched an older one claim something extraordinary and is not convinced. The oldest of these brothers was James. James watched the ministry from a distance. He did not follow. He watched the crucifixion, and we are not told where he stood, what he felt, watching his older brother die on a Roman cross. There are things the text does not tell us, and sometimes you have to sit with the silence. And then Paul, in his creed, the earliest document we have about the resurrection, lists this. He appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. A private appearance, just Jesus and James. No other witnesses recorded, no script preserved, no detail given except the bare fact. He appeared to James. We do not know what was said, but we know what happened after. James became the leader of the Jerusalem church, not Peter, not John, but James, the brother who did not believe. He led that church for approximately 3 decades. The historian Josephus records his death. He was stoned in approximately AD 62 on the orders of the high priest Ananus for refusing to stop saying that his brother had risen from the dead. Think about that. You are a first-century person. Your brother claimed to be the Son of God. He was arrested, publicly humiliated, and crucified. His followers scattered. You had your doubts before, and now this. The worst possible ending. And then something happens. Something that turns you from a skeptic into a man who will die rather than take back what he saw. The only thing in the historical record that accounts for James's transformation is what Paul says in that creed: the risen Jesus appeared to him. Whatever passed between them in that meeting, whatever Jesus said, whatever James saw, it was enough. The brother who rolled his eyes at the dinner table became the man who stood in front of the Jerusalem council and said, quietly, that his brother was alive and would not take it back even when they picked up the stones. And now we are almost to the 500. But first, we need the man who came last. His name was Saul of Tarsus. He was educated, brilliantly, specifically, ferociously educated. He had sat at the feet of Gamaliel, which was the first-century equivalent of studying at the finest university in the world under its most celebrated professor. He knew the Torah the way a master carpenter knows wood. He knew where the grain ran. He knew exactly which parts the new sect called the Way was misreading, and he was furious about it. He was not angry because he was a bad man. That is the misunderstanding. He was angry because he believed, with the full weight of his training and his conscience, that these people were blaspheming, that their claim about a crucified carpenter from Galilee being the risen Messiah was an offense against everything holy. And in the tradition he came from, you did not tolerate blasphemy. You acted against it. He acted against it. He held the coats of the men who stoned Stephen. He went house to house in Jerusalem, dragging out believers, men and women, and handing them over for imprisonment. He got letters of authority from the high priest and rode toward Damascus with the specific intention of doing the same thing there. He was not a villain in his own story. He was a defender of the faith. And here is where it gets remarkable. Somewhere on the road to Damascus, a road Paul knew, in broad daylight, not in the ambiguity of darkness or half-sleep, something happened. Paul himself will describe it 3 times in Acts and once in his letters. Every account has the same core, a light, far beyond the brightness of the sun, that knocked him to the ground, and a voice, saying his name, the way Jesus had said Mary's name in the garden, specific, personal, cutting through everything else. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he said, still on the ground, still blind from the light, who are you, Lord? I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. He lay there in the road for what must have felt like a very long time. When his companions helped him up and led him into Damascus, he was blind. He would not eat or drink for 3 days. And whatever was breaking and reordering inside him in those 3 days in the dark, when he came out of it, he was not the same man who had ridden into Syria with arrest warrants in his saddlebag. He was baptized. He began preaching in the Damascus synagogues that Jesus was the Son of God. The same people who had received his letters as a persecutor of the church watched him become its most ferocious advocate in a matter of days. The Roman historian Tacitus, writing in the early 2nd century, documented the persistence of the Christian movement, despite Rome's efforts to suppress it, noting that it had spread not only through Judea, but across the entire empire. What Tacitus did not fully account for was why. Part of the answer is this man. This one man who turned around on a road and never looked back. Paul will be shipwrecked 3 times, beaten 5 times with 39 lashes, stoned once and left for dead, imprisoned more times than he can count, and eventually executed in Rome. He will write letters to churches across the Mediterranean world that will still be read 2,000 years later. And in one of those letters, 1 Corinthians, written around AD 55, approximately 22 years after the crucifixion, he will include what scholars call the earliest creed in Christian history, a statement of belief that most historians date to within 3 to 5 years of the events themselves, probably handed to Paul when he visited Peter and James in Jerusalem shortly after his conversion. The creed goes like this: Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures. He was buried. He was raised on the 3rd day in accordance with the Scriptures. He appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers and sisters at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. Last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared also to me, most of whom are still alive. Paul wrote that deliberately. He is not offering this as mythology or metaphor. He is saying, go check. These people are alive. You can ask them. He is making an evidential claim in a letter meant to be read publicly, in a city, Corinth, with enough travelers and trade connections to verify it. And there it is. The 500. We have been carrying that number since the beginning. A crowd. An outdoor appearance, most likely, given the size of it. No location given. No names recorded beyond the bare number. Over 500 living witnesses at the time Paul wrote those words. Here's what that number means in the world of ancient testimony. In Roman courts, the standard for establishing legal fact was 2 or 3 witnesses. 500 is not a number you invent when you are trying to persuade people in the same generation the event occurred. You do not claim 500 living witnesses in an era when witnesses can be questioned, when the claim can be checked, when the people who want to disprove you are actively looking for reasons to disprove you. 500 people, most of them still alive. What do you do with that? Paul tells us what he did with it. He spent the rest of his life traveling across the Roman Empire, planting churches in city after city, and at the end, he walked into a Roman prison and never walked out. He had seen the Lord. He could not unknow it. He calls himself one untimely born, one who came to the list last, out of sequence, like a child delivered before its time. He did not follow Jesus during the ministry. He did not sit at table with him. He did not watch the miracles. He came late, by a road he had not chosen, knocked flat in the dust and blinded by noonday light, and he spent the rest of his life trying to give everyone he met what had been given to him. So, what do we do with all of this? We have spent time with the witnesses. We have sat with Mary in the garden, with Peter by the fire, with Thomas in the locked room, with Cleopas on the road, with James in whatever private meeting the text does not record, and with Paul in the dust of the Damascus road. These are not characters from mythology. They are people with names, histories, failures, and specific reasons to doubt every one of them. Mary had every reason to think she was talking to a gardener. Peter had every reason to stay home and hide. Thomas had every reason to demand evidence. James had years of skepticism behind him. Paul had every training and every conviction pointing the other direction, and not one of them could unknow what they saw. Here is the first thing to take away. The resurrection was not designed to make things easier. Every person who saw the risen Jesus had their life complicated by it. Mary was sent back into a city that did not believe her. Peter was asked 3 hard questions by a fire. Thomas has carried the label doubter for 2,000 years. James was stoned. Paul was beaten, imprisoned, and beheaded. The appearance of the risen Christ was not a comfort gift wrapped in soft light. It was a commission. It pulled each of them out of safety and into something larger and more costly than anything they had planned. If what you are looking for is a faith that makes your life simpler and your path straighter, the witness list is not promising. But if what you need is something true enough to build a life on something that held under the weight of floggings and stonings and Roman courts and public humiliation and death, then the witness list becomes very interesting. Indeed. Here is the second thing to take away. Every single person on that list came to the risen Jesus from a place of loss or failure, not from confidence. Mary came with burial spices. Peter came with 3 denials and a fire-lit memory he could not shake. Thomas came with the specific grief of having missed it. Cleopas and his companion came with words in the past tense we had hoped. James came with a lifetime of not believing. Paul came with a horse and a bag of arrest warrants and a theology that had no room for what was about to hit him. God appears to have a particular preference for finding people in the middle of their worst moment, not after they have sorted themselves out, not when they have arrived at a place of sufficient clarity. In the dark, on the road, on the beach at dawn, in a locked room, in the dust of a road to Damascus. There is one more thing. Jesus said something to Thomas that he meant for everyone who came after. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. That blessing is a real one. It is not a consolation prize for people who missed out. It is a recognition that faith, exercised without the direct sight Thomas had, carries its own weight and its own particular dignity. You are not at a disadvantage because you were not in the garden. You are not less than the people on this list because you cannot put your hand into the wound. The risen Jesus told Thomas explicitly you are included. The blessing reaches forward through every century and finds you exactly where you are. The witnesses did their job. Mary carried the message. Peter fed the sheep. Thomas declared the highest confession in John's Gospel. The 2 from Emmaus walked back 7 miles in the dark because the burning in them would not let them wait. James led the church in Jerusalem for 30 years and died rather than take it back. Paul traveled the Roman Empire and wrote letters that still hold. They saw so that others could believe without seeing. They were the beginning of a chain that is still intact. And if this is the first time you have sat with these stories long enough to feel the weight of them, if something in you is stirring or burning, the way it burned in 2 men on a road 2,000 years ago, do not wait until you have all the answers. They did not have all the answers either. They had an encounter. They had a name spoken in the dark. They had a fire on a beach and bread broken at a table and a voice at noon on a road. The witnesses are not calling you to certainty. They are calling you to look. Because what happens when you look is the oldest story still being told. If this video moved you, if something landed differently today than you expected, share it with one person. That is how this has always worked. Mary told Peter. Peter told the church. The church told the world. One conversation at a time. Thank you for being here.